How was the transition after the Air Force and the FBI into this business?
So, believe it or not, it was a 180, but it was somewhat of an organic 180. And I say this because everything, I never looked for it, but it kind of found me. And I'll give you a very simple example of why. Because obviously, most people, or let's say, in instance, myself, when you're growing up, when you're moving up the ranks in whatever profession or skill you decide to pursue, you always have long-term goals, and most of those goals are associated with retirement, of what's going to happen whenever you can't push at the same force that you can, when you're in your younger years. So I always, since I worked for the government, I relied on 401ks and savings accounts, right? And I realized with time that no matter where I would move, location or job, that's what would follow. But the only time that I had a substantial amount, like a bonus, was whenever I would purchase a home and then when I would sell it. But I never looked at it at that point as a source of constant revenue or of main revenue. It was just something that happened like, hey, look, I had to move from Pensacola to Miami. So the house that I had bought, when I was 21, I was 21 years old when I bought my first home. I remember I bought a Lennar home with a VA loan. They actually paid me to close.
When you were in the base?
Yes. When I was in the Air Force, which crazy, crazy times to think that I got paid to be able to close because the developer was giving some type of incentive.
Credits, yes.
Yeah. And so I just, had bought the house just because I just felt that was like the adult thing to do at that point. And then whenever I left the Air Force, I sold the house and I was like, wow, I can't believe that without even trying, I had some equity built in the home, and I was able to move on to other investments. So I didn't think much of what had happened at that point, but I was the first my first encounter with real estate. And then when I moved to Miami, same thing. I moved to a new city, even though I was born here, but I didn't grow up here. I didn't live here, so it was a new city to me. So I moved like most people that live here now. That they, obviously after the pandemic, this has been a safe haven for a lot of people in the world. So that was me. Moved to Miami, and I lived in different spots. And as you had mentioned, I did work for the FBI Miami for 10 years. So the headquarters at that point were further up north. So it made sense to just move to Broward. And I lived in Broward for a little bit.
Which is where I met you.
That is correct. I remember, yes. You used to live in Weston, I believe, right?
Yes.
And at that point, I was living in Pembroke Pines. So I got to live the Broward life, and I understood the pros and the cons. And I remember I had gone under contract on a property, but then my realtor back then had an apartment in Brickell and said, you know what, why don't you live there while you close? And I'm going to say, not taking away from anything, but for that point in my life, because I understand that everyone goes through a different phase in their life where at some points an apartment works, sometimes a big house works, sometimes a small house, sometimes not even owning a property, but renting it. So there's always different levels of how real estate can fall in your trajectory. And at that point, I was single, didn't have any kids, let's say that, correction. And so we moved to this apartment in Brickell, and I'm like, you know what, this is what I feel Miami should be. And I was working in Broward, but I said, you know what, that's fine, I'll work with the commute. And I understood also at that point the what a property does for you besides just the buying and selling and profiting from it, but also the different avenues and doors that it opens up for you. And I understood traffic very well, knowing that you're flowing against traffic, and how that can make or break your life, right? So all these things. So my regular life before I was a real estate advisor kind of prepped me up for understanding the dynamic of it, and to be able to basically translate, because real estate, I guess it's a language. Everybody needs to communicate, but everybody communicates in a different language. So it's important in my role to be able to pass on the knowledge, the information, and the communication in a term that works for you at the whatever specific level you're at in that trajectory of real estate. And when I'm saying trajectory is because everyone, if you think about it, everyone touches real estate at some point, right? Is it, are they renting? Are they buying? Are they selling? Do they want a second property? Or, so there's different levels of it. So you always have to understand what cards are handled and what is it that you can do. And that's my language. That's it, my expertise, because interacting with people like you, interacting with clients that you have had, interacting with people that I've met throughout my stay here in Miami, when I lived in Broward, when I lived here, when I was at the FBI. So all these give me knowledge, and I can pass on, translate it to the plain language, and pass it on to the clients that I encounter. That everyone, again, has a specific mission, because not everybody is into this. Everybody diversifies their portfolio, but when it comes to speaking real estate, it's important that I know how to plainly explain and understand the dynamic of risk, of reward, bring it all together so we all get to the final goal, which is prospering from it.
Do you want to go take the coffee
Let's prosper
outside?
this beautiful weather.
It's just such a beautiful day that I feel like we should be out in the terrace and finishing this coffee up there. Want to go?
Sounds like a plan.